It is summer in Ottawa, and the tourists have come to Parliament Hill. They've come in their cars from homes across the Dominion and from the United States border barely 60 miles to the south. Joneses from Saskatchewan and Kellys from Boston are putting the capital into their scrapbooks. With Kodaks and Rolleicords, they take pictures of themselves under the great arch of the House of Commons, pictures of the clock in the top of the Peace Tower. Beneath the tower is the Memorial Chamber, a national shrine holding within it Canada's proud remembrance of those who served in the First Great War. Carved in stone brought from France, Belgium and Britain, simple bas-reliefs tell the story of Canada's fighting forces, the firm attack at the gates of Arras, the dogged stand of the artillery at St. Julian. A nation's tribute to the 60,000 Canadians who gave their lives. Sunlight, filtered through the warmth of English stained glass, fills the chamber with mysterious light, well befitting a place hallowed by the nation's dead. In the floor, paved with stone from the battlefields of Flanders, bronze nameplates honor the men who fell. From balconies on the Peace Tower, visitors first look westward toward the prairies. Here, set on a bluff high over the water, stand the great blocks of government buildings. The simple and dignified Supreme Court building, whose cornerstone was laid by the Queen in 1939. The Bank of Canada, a central clearinghouse owned by the people. The Department of Agriculture, custodian of the greatest granary in the world today. To the north, beyond the city of Hull, lie the oldest hills in the world, the Laurentians. Hull is the last big town on the way to the Arctic, for the wilderness stretches unbroken 4,000 miles to the pole. Below, the Ottawa River flows eastward to Montreal and the sea. The Indians called it Adawe, after the traders and pioneers who used it as a path through the wilderness, Champlain, Marquette, and LaSalle. The river rushes down from the Northland and pours its energy over cliffs of rock into the basin called La Chaudière, the cauldron, and here it boils with the fierce energy it has gathered on its 600-mile journey from the hills. From those hills came timber. White pine and spruce stood in the northern forest. Maple, birch, and poplar covered the ancient land. Later, rafts came down the river, with timber to build the ships for Canada's growing trade. A harvest reaped in the hinterland floated down and gathered in booms below the falls. It meant wood for clippers to carry Canadian commerce to Europe and the Far East. Today, their sons still sort the logs in the lower reaches of the river. With long pike poles, they turn the glistening timber in the water to find the rough-hewn mark designating the owner of each log. In the company slips where the Ottawa meets the Gatineau, they straighten out the logs and steer them onto the hooks of the jack ladder. Up rise the spruce and poplar, birch and white pine, and the lumber piles grow. Men have built a dam to harness the river's power to their machines, and the river now strains against the man-made piers that hold it back. The strength of 500,000 horses suddenly checked after wearing away the rock since time was young. Great lumber mills now rise on the brink of the falls. On one side is an English city bearing an Indian name, Ottawa. At the other end of the dam, drawing its power from the same mighty source, stands a city entirely French, but called by an English name, Hull. Twin cities, speaking two languages, but joined by many bridges, and sprung from the same surging union of timber and the river. More than a century has passed since locks were built in the village of Bytown to transport soldiers down the Rideau River. Bytown has now become Ottawa, and freighters move on the big river, bringing cargoes to the growing city. French and English, Scots and Irish have labored together, building up Canada's vast trade under the towers that rise on the cliff, towers of a city that has become the capital of a dominion stretching from Atlantic to Pacific. Today, lumber still moves on the river, hardwoods for pit props and furniture and flooring, softwoods for pulp to feed the news presses of a continent. Behind her industries and her huge lumber trade stand the people of Ottawa. For beneath her majestic history, Ottawa is still an ordinary Canadian town, where 200,000 French and English-speaking people live together in harmony. Around the popcorn carts on the side streets, children of both races crowd on the long summer evenings. Here as elsewhere, they meet new Canadians. Harry Elichuk came from the Ukraine and drives his wagon over the streets of the capital, making hot buttered popcorn, joking with the boys, and enjoying the freedom he crossed the seas to find. For there is space for living in Ottawa, grass and trees between the houses, and vacant lots where boys can play baseball after school. For the mothers of these children, there is the great open marketplace in the lower town. Here they can buy produce fresh from the rich farmlands of the Ottawa Valley, butter and eggs and crisp green vegetables gathered before the sun was up. Of a Saturday, as many as 15,000 people will pour into the marketplace from the hinterland of Ontario and Quebec. Women of every faith and calling meet here to bargain and buy, and among the crowded stalls are faces which hark back across the centuries to the villages of old France. It might be a marketplace in the Normandy from which many of their forefathers once came. Things are cheaper here and fresh from the brown earth of the valley. Careful housewives come to choose the best for their menfolk who work in the mills or unload the cargoes that move along the river. A man gets hungry rafting logs all day, a man like Henry Davis, who has worked for 6 years for the pulp company to support his family of 5. In the government offices, French and English work together, for the mechanics of running Canada is Ottawa's business. From office boy to deputy minister, over 20,000 Ottawa people help in the job of running their country. Beneath the arched Gothic roof of the House of Commons, 245 members of Parliament, elected by Atlantic fishermen, prairie farmers, and the city dwellers of Ontario and Quebec, enact the nation's laws. From the adjoining Red Chamber, the Senate preserves the tradition of an upper house, inherited from the Parliament of Great Britain. For Ottawa belongs to the nation, and the Federal District Commission is making it a new planned town. From the National War Memorial Plaza, a series of parks and lagoons runs out along the banks of the Rideau Canal. Through these parks, tree-lined drives link the main highways with the city streets. The Commission has also reclaimed swampland along the bottom of the Rideau River and turned it into playgrounds and landscape parks. When the steamy heat of July and August makes the pavement hot underfoot, the people of Ottawa take to the hills and the river. On Saturday afternoons and Sundays, cars are thick along the federal parkways leading from the city to the streams and forests nearby. They make for the shores of the Ottawa River or the shady woods where the smell of spruce needles fills the air. In the small lakes that lie 600 feet up in the hills, with trees right down to the water's edge, the long summer days become cool and carefree. With the coming of October, the landscape changes to colors of unbelievable beauty. The elms turn to gold, the maples flame on hillsides and valleys. Barely 12 miles from the city, in the heart of the Gatineau Hills, Canada has set aside a national park for the enjoyment of the people. The slopes of the ancient Laurentians are crisscrossed with trails on which the fresh fallen leaves make a carpet of gold and russet. Young people pack their meals and walk in the hills, finding the steep trails that lead to the crest of King Mountain. The woods are filled with the rustle of summer's end, and the distance is blue with haze. Then cold November winds bare the branches, and only the last brown leaves remain. Winter comes gently to the city, with soft snow on the roofs and the naked trees. A silencing cloth spreads over the busy avenues of Centre Town. It whitens the streets and buildings of the old French Lower Town, where the Basilica lifts twin spires to the winter sky. The swish of the sled replaces the rattle of the delivery wagon, and sleigh bells tinkle along the streets. By December, the snow is heavy, but Canadians, with skill born of long practice, soon dig themselves out. On the morning after a snowfall, hundreds of men are busy with plows and shovels. The piles left at the roadside are carried away in deep box sleighs or in a special type of open truck, and at noon the streets are clear for traffic. By midwinter, 2 feet of snow-covered ice makes a solid bridge connecting Ottawa and Hull. But the river still runs beneath. The canal is now frozen solid, but gangers have cleared the railroad tracks and the life of the city goes on. Across the dazzling white parks, the people walk to their homes, lying snug in the deep drifts of snow. Canadians have learned to build strongly against the gales that blow from the north. For the children, the deep snow right at their front door is sheer delight. Canada has learned to use its winter for pleasure, to meet the cold days on their own terms. On weekends, skaters crowd the rinks, which spring up each year by the simple process of pouring water on the ground and letting it freeze. There is music in the crunch of blades and the singing hum of the ice. But the real professionals have no need to bother with a rink, for in every Ottawa backyard there's enough ice to skate on and no rules against hockey sticks. This is a man's game, and girls must run its risks or stay off the ice. Many internationally famous hockey players have learned the fundamentals of the game on the corner lots of Ottawa. The swift passes, the nimble footwork, the stuff of which champions are made. With the bright days of the new year, the great exodus to the hills begins. Young people head for the Gatineau, where the snow is crisp and powdery. Comfortable ski lodges lie among the hills, and from each spreads a network of trails: George's Trail, the Canyon, the Highland, Little Switzerland, and the merry-go-round. The Ottawa Ski Club has the largest membership of any ski club in the world. At Camp Fortune Lodge, near Kingsmere, there are slopes for beginners and tricky hills for expert skiers to enjoy the thrill of speed in the cold wind and the sparkle of sun on the snow. Below the ski slopes, the city lies blanketed in deep snow, and while the traffic is silent on the river, the cold water still flows seaward far beneath. Winter lies heavy on the roofs and the spires of the lumber town which has become the nation's capital. Behind the city lies the great Precambrian shield, stretching north and west to the Arctic tundra. But even in the stillness, the springs of life are working under the frozen ground, waiting for the sun to set them free, that they may live once again the gorgeous pageantry of the Canadian autumn.